things that we call choltunes, which are these storage units that the Maya dug into bedrock to probably store grain, sometimes water if they sealed them. And so we're like, well, that was pretty cool because it was a lot larger than anything that we were expecting to find. It was probably about my height in terms of the size of the mound. And I remained skeptical for most of the time. So I said, well, we need to look on the front side because when you come up this massive slope and then find a mound right on the edge, it has a false sense of looking large. But we went around to the front and it actually looked maybe even a little more impressive. So it was a serious thing. So then we decided to continue on, and the walk from the road to there was only about 400 meters, something like that. But then we had to go something like 1.6K through just kind of thick jungle, very up and down, hilly. We had the two young guys, the two workmen, did yeoman's duty cutting our paths, and at that point we realized we should have brought our lunch pretty much at the base of the second hill, and we decided to push on and climbed up to the top, and again, this time we started spotting some quarries and more of these storage facilities. And when you find quarries, you sort of expect to find at least a mound or something, and then eventually, yeah, we found another single masonry mound up here. And so then I found this actually to be kind of weird because it's unusual to find a single mound in general, because usually people organize themselves around a plaza or a courtyard with usually at least two in like an L shape. And so we were trying to think about this, and then especially in comparison to this other area that I'd surveyed where we found all sorts of low residential mounds. And then I realized that the peaks I had selected were really the highest possible peaks in the area, and Sarah reminded me that she had done a recon down here earlier in the season and had found a single mound up there as well. And so one thing that stands out is that this site up here, which is Bay Bukal, which has important stela at it and a looted royal tomb and is pretty substantial, we know from the textual information is definitely belonging to Zotz. It's part of the Zotz kingdom. And so then I thought, well, surely they must have integrated their political kingdom a little better. And, you know, why couldn't it be that the tallest peaks were controlled by the capital here, and maybe these single mounds and storage units are sort of watchtowers, stations where things were collected. And so I think our next step, based on this information, will be to do an inner visibility study using the GIS data, and just figure out how expansive the view sheds are from these different towers, and see how much they overlap with other high points where we have sort of state level construction. So I was honestly expecting to find some really dinky residential mounds, perhaps more numerous than the number of mounds we found, but it was really great to find something pretty substantial and large. And we decided to name the first sort of watchtower station after Jason's recently departed mother-in-law. La Seugra is the word for mother-in-law in Spanish, and so we will make sure to immortalize her with that site naming. So I thought it was really productive day. We walked a lot, and yeah, and we're excited to now do the more techno stuff that Albert's doing.
Albert and team. I really didn't do anything. I actually kind of just ran around taking photos and doing the real stuff. Talking on the radio a lot. You've heard all of our radio calls. So we tried out a lot of things and got beat up a lot by this incredibly intense environment. We had two separate teams basically operating the whole time. Ryan and Perry on the terrestrial surveys, and then Eric and Dom and Kurt on the aerial surveys. And from the aerial perspective, we're going to have some pretty cool stuff, because we did, around those 5 temples, a lot of surveys where we flew the drone up in a place where you really wouldn't be able to get a perspective otherwise from. Within the trees, I mean, we're talking about flying this thing within thick, dense trees to get photos of these big mounds from multiple angles to recreate them into a single massive 3D reconstruction. And in parallel to that, we were doing LiDAR and structure from motion, what we call the cave cam processing, where we're trying to capture in very high resolution everything that's there. You want to pull up that last site that was your site? Hold on. And then
and then I did something.
And then everybody saw, obviously, or heard about our aerial surveys, our large-scale aerial survey woes. Dom is convinced that it's, as expressed, and I don't deny the possibility that it could be some localized, magnetic anomaly right at the top of M7-1 that is causing some issues. But
it's probably all those magnets I left in there.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. So essentially, we climbed to the top of that, and started doing our large-scale aerial flights amongst the spider monkeys and howler monkeys, and at the top of the canopy, and pretty much off the bat realized that we were totally effed, because they would take up, they'd press autopilot, things would look okay, then they'd press go on their flight path, and it would just nose down and shoot off in the exact wrong direction, hundreds of meters away. While at which time Dom, while standing very precariously on a site about the size of maybe double the size of this table, and on either edge having a death ball, right, is sitting there, just staring up and saying, "Oh shit," Actually, I said "oh shit" a couple of times. I said "oh shit," a couple of times. But eventually, what we ended up being able to do was just give up on the computer and take over manual controls. And how long have you been flying drones for? A couple of years. And how long have you been flying drones for?
A couple of years.
And have you ever crashed a drone before?
Never.
Have you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, today was
Dom was in charge.
Dom's first crash ever. Right?
No damage.
Yeah, no damage.
Doesn't count.
Hey, you scuffed the camera.
No, but we ended up doing a big, huge survey at some point in which things were really hitting the fan because we completely lost eyesight and hearing of the drone itself, and we're flying completely off the computer, which doesn't have anything other than a dot and a direction. So Dom's staring at this thing, freaking out.
The direction
and people
and the direction was wrong. That was a problem. That's why the autopilot didn't work. Our compass didn't work.
And people across the site, which were all the way spread out to the 5 houses, aka Zone 8, Zone 9, were calling up on the radio, "We spot the crawler!" Sort of keeping eyes on it as it's going over them. And eventually we got it back. And I think, how many photos have we captured off of that aerial survey?
From the flyaway flight or in general?
In general.
In general, we generated 12 gigabytes of pictures, which means around, what, 12 gigabytes, 1,200 pictures.
1,200 pictures from above, looking straight down, which we're going to try to recreate into a very high resolution single image of the entire site. And I think we're
It is a jungle.
Look at the first outputs from the lunar tunnel, what we call a lunar tunnel, with our LiDAR, our terrestrial LiDAR. You ready for this exposure here?